Hello, and welcome to Evochron Mercenary. This is going to be a tutorial series on this game to get you familiar with the basics of this wonderful freeform space simulator. I'm not going to do a full Let's Play, largely because the game is so open-ended that it would be very difficult to tell, when we had finished the game. So instead, I've decided that this series will be kind of a tutorial series, and I'll go over the controls, a lot of the concepts of the game. I'll show you how the different functions of your ship and the screens that are available to you work. And I'm going to do this because this game has a fairly steep learning curve, and which, a lot of space sims do. The genre is kind of infamous for that. But this is a fantastic game, and I think more people should be playing it. It's on Steam now. You can also get it directly from the developer's website. I'll try to put some links in the description of the video for the Steam store page and the developer's website where you can purchase the game directly. I purchased it from the developer's website before it was on Steam. Now, I'm not an expert at this game, but I am familiar with all the basics, and I think I can get you off to a good start. So, let's talk a little bit about Evochron Mercenary. Evochron Mercenary was released a few years ago now. I think it was in 2010 or 11. It's actually not the first game by this company. The company is called Star Wraith Games. The company's made a few more traditional space sims, mission-based, kind of like Wing Commander space sims, and they've made a couple of other, 2 or 3 other freeform, open universe space sims. And what's really cool about Star Wraith Games is that it is basically one guy. Yeah. It's basically one guy who's made all this stuff, who's made this humongous game. And the scope of Evochron Mercenary is just tremendous. This is probably the only space game that I've ever played that really gives me the sense that outer space is this huge expanse. Where distances are vast and there are things to be discovered and explored, and there's just a lot to do and see and places to go. So this game has a lot of great atmosphere, but it also has you need a fair amount of technical ability to play this game. This is a game where a large part of the game is in successfully and efficiently maneuvering your spacecraft in 3-dimensional space under a pretty strict, pretty rigid Newtonian physics model. So, if that doesn't sound like the kind of space sim that you would like, there are others out there where the flight models may be a little more arcadey. Some people just don't really get into the more Newtonian games, but if that sounds like what you would like to play, I heartily recommend this game. So we're actually going to start a new pilot. I've got a profile here that I've been playing that we will play on a little bit when we get into some of the more advanced tutorials, but we're going to create a pilot, and we're going to have to enter a call sign. I'm going to call him Marlow 2. Well, we'll just call him Marlow 221 after the name of the channel. Now, we have to pick a starting role. Our choices are Mercenary, Miner/Trader, Combat Pilot, and Racer. The only thing this really does is it affects what ship you start out with. The loadout of that ship and the equipment that is on it. The ships are highly customizable in this game, and probably I'll spend an entire episode just showing you how all that works. And this series could be 10, 11, 12 episodes or so of instruction, but and there are tutorials in the game that are really good too. But hopefully somebody out there will get some value from this. But at any rate, we're going to go with the Mercenary starting role simply because it is probably the most well-rounded. The ship that you're given is equipped for a, kind of a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none mission role. My Marlowe profile that you saw a minute ago, I started with the minor trader starting role, but we're going to go with the mercenary one on this one. And okay, and that brings you to this lovely, lovely title screen. The music in this game is fantastic. Creates a great atmosphere. Now, I actually have some of the graphics options turned down a little bit for the sake of recording it. You wouldn't be able to see it on YouTube anyway, but this is really a beautiful game. And what's great about it is that it really doesn't take a very fancy computer to run it. I'm actually playing this game on an HP laptop with switchable graphics that I bought 3 years ago. So, and I can max it out when I'm not recording. When I'm recording, not so much. Now, I'm going to go into the options screen because there's a couple things I want to show you that you should kind of pay attention to. Now, this is the main thing right here. Planet rendering pre-generated. The other option is procedural. When I'm playing the game without recording it, I've had it on procedural and I haven't noticed any problems. When I was doing some test videos, the game was really chugging along, and so I came in here and I turned down the graphics detail and texture quality to medium, but I basically can't tell that I did it. And turned off anti-aliasing. I can tell a little bit, but it's I don't think it's going to be noticeable on a YouTube video. And we're running in 1080p. But at any rate, I hit this, and what it does is it basically takes up a little more hard drive space. It expands the size of the install on your hard drive, but it will improve your performance. It took like 15 minutes for this to pre-generate the universe, but it's really, I think it's worth doing. So this game does support 3D head tracking technology. If you have a webcam, you can actually turn your head and a little bit, and you can make your head in the move in the cockpit. The game does update from time to time. The developer, the one guy who made this game, is still updating it, still patching it, and has even pushed out some additional content that is free for the game since it first came out. This guy's great. I don't know his real name. His name on the forums, on the official forums, is Vice. And when I first started playing the game, I had some questions, and I posted in their newbie forum, and the first person who responded to me was Vice. The guy who created the game was the first person to try to help me with the questions that I had about, his baby. So, great guy who's made a great game. The controls are highly configurable. You can use joysticks, you can use a gamepad. I play the game with mouse and keyboard myself, but you can configure. Oops, I didn't mean to push that. Yeah, you can configure all the controls. I have changed the controls a little bit. I'm not using all the default controls. Mostly I am, but at any rate, so there are some training missions. I recommend that if you buy this game, and you should buy this game, but I recommend that if you buy this game that you go through the training missions. But I thought I'd make these tutorials because even with the training missions, there are still some things that to me were slightly less than crystal clear, and I thought that it would be fun to play this game and record it and show everybody how things work in the game. Now, okay, so we're going to launch. You can play single player, you can play multiplayer. Multiplayer is free. There are a variety of servers you can play on. They're fairly active. I've met some nice people playing who are more than willing to help a new player out, so don't be shy about that. And what's nice is that if you buy a new ship or earn a bunch of money in multiplayer, it carries over to single player. The only thing that doesn't carry over between and vice versa. If you do it in single player, when you join a multiplayer server on that pilot, on that profile, then you have all your stuff that you earned in the single-player game. The only thing that doesn't carry over is your reputation in various systems throughout the game, and that's so that you can go do things in multiplayer and not ruin your reputation or change your reputation in your single-player game, so that it's easier to go do things with other people. We're going to stick to single-player right now. Okay, so we're going to hit launch. There is a little bit of a loading screen, although I will say that the loading screen seems to be going faster now that I've done the pre-generated option in the game than it did in the procedural version. I didn't have a stopwatch on it, so I may not be correct about that. It may just be, my mind playing tricks on me, but it certainly seems that way. So once the game loads up, we'll immediately be in the cockpit of our ship. So, welcome to Evochron Mercenary. Now, all this text up here in the corner is about a quest, and we will talk about quests later on, but we're just going to go over some of the basics right now. Okay, so that is a huge space station that you see in front of us. And there's a planet over here, and honestly, is this game not beautiful? It really is. The lighting is fantastic. The music is wonderful. I just can't believe that one person made this game. I just can't get over that. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give ourselves, oops, sorry about that. We're going to get away from civilization just a bit so that we can play around and, not be in the way of anything. So we're just going to get a little breathing room between us and everything else. So I just hit the jump drive, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But right now, we just want to do some of the basic stuff. That's a nav point that my computer automatically set when I hit the jump drive. Don't worry about that right now. Okay, so right now our ship is at a dead stop, and what you're seeing on the screen is probably a little overwhelming. The HUD is pretty busy, but there are certain things here that really I don't want to say they don't matter, but some things are more important than others. So let's talk about what we're seeing here. Now, a couple of the basic controls. By default, if you move the mouse, your ship will also change its orientation. So, if you want to move the mouse around the screen without, twisting your ship in circles, you have to hold down the Alt key. Once you do that, you can move the mouse around the screen. So, my finger's probably going to get tired holding down the Alt key, but that's okay. So let's talk about what we're seeing here. Let's start in the middle. In the middle is our HUD. This big circle, the big circle, is kind of our weapons cone of fire, if you will. Think of it that way, that your weapons will kind of fire in that circular area. This game has computer-assisted targeting. You can turn it off, and some people might say, "Oh, computer-assisted targeting, that's for the weak." Leave it on, otherwise you'll never hit anything in this game. The Newtonian physics will just screw with you. So use the computer-assisted targeting. I promise you, the AI are using it when they're shooting at you. So everything's very blue in our HUD and in our cockpit, but you can see these green lines here. That's a visual representation of the strength of your shields. You basically have 4 shield facings that cover your ship in 3-dimensional space. So the green, if we were taking damage right now, we would see these green lines start to shrink towards the middle, and they would start to turn yellow and orange and red as you took shield damage. Right now, of course, our shields are in wonderful health because we're in the starting system, which is pretty safe. You have a pitch indicator up here, let me let off. So as I pitch up and pitch down, now of course there is no up and down in space, but this is, I think, relative to the galactical elliptical, the elliptical plane of the galaxy. If for those of you not familiar with astronomy terms, the elliptical simply refers to the plane on which most celestial bodies like stars and planets tend to be on or near. Just like how in our solar system, you know, most of the planets are pretty much, you know, all the orbits line up pretty well. Not exactly, but pretty well with each other. That's the elliptical. So that's what that's based on. So you'll see that move around. Now, there's some other indicators here. I'm pushing the wrong button. This indicator right here indicates that our weapons are currently set to both fire at the same time. Let's shoot them. Right now we only have one gun, and yeah, our weapon energy kind of ran low. You can see that down here, the 70% is climbing. That's our weapon energy recharging. Yeah, so this down here you can see our velocity. Our current velocity is 0. Our velocity is set at 0 as well. Those two numbers can be different. And then this indicates that we have IDS on. That is the internal inertial dampening system. I mentioned that this game follows a Newtonian flight model, but your ship can be equipped with an inertial dampening system that will try to make your ship use its thrusters automatically to make you fly in the direction that you're facing, like an airplane in the atmosphere. You will still notice some lag time because not because the game is lagging, but because the thrusters can only fire so fast, and there are different levels of thrusters and so on and so forth, but we'll worry about that later. This MDTS ready, that is the indicator that your computer-assisted targeting is on, and then the heat indicator shows you how much heat your ship is generating in the space around you, which you might want to know when you're trying to dodge missiles fired at you by hostile ships that are heat-seeking. Now, above us, now we have also an altimeter, an altitude meter, and gravity, which right now we're not affected by because we're in space. But you can fly in atmospheres. That planet that was back there, yeah, you can fly into the atmosphere and you can land on that planet. There are a couple of cities on that planet you can land on and trade at, and it's seamless. There's no loading screens, no nothing. You just fly down there, and then when you get ready to leave, you just lift off and power up through the atmosphere, and you're back in outer space. It's really, really awesome, and we'll do that in a little while. There's a ship that just popped up. He's yellow to us. That means he's kind of neutral, doesn't love us, doesn't hate us. Really, nobody's going to shoot at us in this system, so we can kind of ignore him right now. Okay, so what's up here? We have different buttons that you can push that you can get to different screens, and you know, we're not going to use those very much. It's really better, because to do that you've got to put your finger on the Alt key and then move the mouse. I find it really better to, you know what, let me turn those off. I find it better personally to I find it better to use the keyboard shortcuts in actual gameplay. So we'll talk about that as we go. Okay, the other thing is that the H key can be used to change the HUD. So if you'll watch the center of the screen, okay, right now I've turned everything off inside my ship. Now, you see these three screens down here. There was stuff there, and now there's not. And now you see these little panels here on the sides. Those are purely decorative. They do not convey any information. So don't worry about them. I know that it looks a little overwhelming when you see everything on there at once, but that's just eye candy right there. So don't worry about that. If I hit the H key again to cycle through my HUD options, the HUD will come back on with kind of a reduced set of information around this area, and then we can push HUD once again to get the full thing back. My preference is to have all of the information available personally, but there are times when I will cycle through. In combat, personally, I often like to use this mode, the minimalist kind of mode here. But in regular flight, I tend to like to have the full meal deal. So, okay, so that kind of covers the central area of the HUD and the upper level of the HUD. This is your compass, is a bad word. It shows your heading in degrees. So we will talk about that later. We will actually use that from time to time. And this is just a clock showing how long you've been playing. Now, let's go down to the, to the cockpit screens. Now, some of this information will be redundant, repetitive perhaps, but it's nice that it's provided in more than one place, so you can have information kind of at your fingertips no matter what. So, the first thing here on this top line is velocity. The first number is what our actual velocity is, and the second number is what our velocity, what our goal is. And we can set the velocity different ways that we'll talk about, but it will be displayed in this little line down here that says set. It may be hard for you to see the text on YouTube, but it's very easy to read in game, so don't worry about that. Then gravity, altitude, just like up here, which is helpful because if you have this cockpit mode, you still have that information available to you down here. It's just not directly in front of your eyes. And then IDS is set at a multiplier of 1. We can adjust the IDS up to a multiplier of 5, which gives more and more power to the engines. And we'll talk about that when we talk about, the basics of flight and things of that nature. Then we have a fuel gauge down here. We have 387 units of fuel left. I think we started out with 400-ish or 390 maybe. You can run out of fuel in this game. Shouldn't do that. There are ways to be rescued if you do, but it's just really bad to run out of fuel. And then there are your ship's systems, nav, weapons, and engines, and this shows that they are at 100% health. Your subsystems can be damaged individually, and then there's a little diagram that shows the relative health of your 4 shields. So yeah, now over here, we have 25 countermeasures. That's what this 25 means right here. Now right next to it you should see a 0S/0W, and it says PWR, this little white text right here. That's power. You can adjust the ship's power to your shields or weapons as you want to. When it says 0, that means that it's equal, but you can adjust it if you want to with the bracket keys, the 2 bracket keys right next to your / key on a standard North American keyboard, QWERTY English keyboard. You should have 2 bracket keys. If you hit the left bracket, you'll take more power to shields, and you can go up to a factor of 5, which gives you a -5 in your weapons. So you do have to make some choices there. If you hit the right bracket, you go back the other way up to a maximum of positives. Oh, sorry about that. Meant to hit the Alt key. I'm going to do that, so sorry in advance. Up to a maximum of +5 in the weapons. We're going to even it back out. Yeah, we're going to even it back out. Now, why would you want to do that? In combat, you might want to have more power to weapons so that you can fire your weapons for longer. You see this blue gauge right here. Oh yeah, we now have a missile lock on that poor guy. We're not going to shoot him, though. We don't hate him or anything. And he would kill us dead. But that's what that sound means, and the twirly things around his ship there. Anyway, this blue gauge right here is our weapon meter. As I fire our guns, if you watch that meter, it's going down. And once it runs out, you can't fire anymore. But if I increase our power to weapons, then I can fire for longer before it runs out, and the weapons will recharge faster. Now, there's another time when you might want to use all power to weapons, and that is when you're using your jump drive to jump multiple times in a row. Your jump drive has to recharge between jumps. If you have more power to weapons, it will actually recharge faster. Now, of course, by doing this, we're taking power away from our shields. So that doesn't mean that our shields will take less damage, but what it does mean is that our shields will take longer to recharge when they do take damage. So it's a trade-off that you should think about at different times. Okay, so let's go further into the HUD. This green meter right here is our hull. It shows the health of the hull of our ship, which of course right now is at maximum. You can equip an automated repair unit on your ship that will gradually repair your hull, and that's a nice thing to have. Now below this you'll see a list of numbers 1 through 8, and it says secondary on the other side. These are secondary weapons, in other words, missiles. Right now we have 2 missiles. We have 1 missile in each bay, so the most you can carry is a maximum of 8 missiles. And that doesn't sound like much, and it's not much, so you have to use them carefully. Missiles are pretty strong in this game, but you need to pick your shots pretty carefully. But fortunately, your main guns are also pretty strong in this game. And right now, we only have 1 gun equipped. We have, it looks like a particle cannon equipped that does more damage against hull than shields, but we can also get a beam weapon and equip it at the same time, and that will do more damage against shields than hull, and it's a great combination to have those. So that pretty much takes care of the left side of the cockpit display. Let's talk about the center. The center is a 3-dimensional radar. This game is 3-dimensional. Things will be above you sometimes they'll be below you. Watch as I maneuver the ship. You'll see the okay, so there's the nav point that we looked at earlier. You can tell it's kind of in front of us right now by looking on the screen, and you can see as I change the orientation of the ship, the orientation of the radar changes as well. As we turn our ship around relative to the nav point, you can see it start to rotate back to behind our ship or below it, and so on. Things are color-coded, like that ship that's close to us over here. It's got that little yellow bracket around it. Again, you may have a hard time seeing this on YouTube, but in the game it's small, but it's very easy to see. Now, on the right-hand panel, all this is your target information. That's all it is. It tells you the frame of the ship. We'll talk about what that frame means, but basically the ship class, their velocity and how far they are away from you, the health of their shields, the health of their hull. Now, you can target individual subsystems, weapons, engines, navigation. Weapons are a great thing to target because ships that don't have weapons can't shoot back at you. But we're not going to shoot that guy. But that's all that you really ever see on this side of the HUD. So unless you're in combat, which, you could be in combat a lot if you want to in this game, but you might be doing, there's a lot of other things non-combat type of things you can do as well. And, so this whole panel over here, you can almost pretty much ignore a lot of the time because you're not in combat. It's really only useful during combat. So, that's pretty much the HUD. So, let's talk about basic controls. I told you about how if you move the mouse, you move the orientation of your ship. Why do I say orientation and not, well, because what you're doing is you're just pivoting the ship. You're using the thrusters on your ship to point the nose of your ship in a different direction. Up, down, left, right, diagonally, so on and so forth. So, how do we move? Well, I'm going to tell you mostly about the keyboard and mouse combination because that's what I use. I don't have a joystick. I do have a gamepad, but it doesn't have enough keys on it, so I'd still have to use the keyboard for some things and take my hand off the controller, so I just use keyboard and mouse. And personally, I find keyboard and mouse to be a great way to play this game. And the other reason I'm going to tell you about keyboard and mouse is because if you're the kind of person who in 2014 has a PC joystick, you probably don't need this tutorial. You've probably been playing Space Sims for a long time. So, how do we move the ship? Well, there's in some ways it's a lot like a first-person shooter on PC. You can use the W, A, S, and D keys. Now, they are mapped by default to move your ship up, down, left, and right. Not forward or backward. We'll talk about forward and backwards in a minute. So, yeah, if you push W, your ship is going to go straight up, like it's in an elevator. You know, well, up relative, no up in space. You know what I mean. If you push S, your ship is going to go down relative to your position. And A and D are to strafe left and right. Now, as I do that, you can probably tell, even in a YouTube video, that there's a cursor that moves as we move the ship. I'll explain what that is in a little bit once we start actually flying forwards. So, W, A, S, and D. Now, to go, Q and E are also movement keys. If you would like to roll the ship counterclockwise or to the left, you use the Q key, and to roll clockwise or to the right, you use the E key. Now, what about forwards, right? We're just sitting still. We're not going anywhere. Well, it depends on whether or not you are in inertial flight mode or IDS flight mode. In IDS flight mode, what one does is one sets your velocity at a certain speed, and we'll talk about how you do that in a second, and your ship will use its engines to maintain that velocity, and as you maneuver, it will attempt to use the engines and the thrusters to maintain that velocity and maintain that velocity in the direction that you have changed your ship to face. So, how do we do that? Right now we're at IDS times 1, which is fine. The way you do it is with the number keys at the top of your keyboard. There are basically 9 settings for IDS. So if I hit the 1 key, right, we are now moving forward at 55. I don't know. I think that's meters per second, I think is what it's supposed to be. Don't worry about that. Just know that now we're moving forward. Now you can't really tell on the screen. So let's hit 2. And this is percentage of maximum, basically. Now, I don't know if you can see it on YouTube, but your ship's computer generates velocity lines, kind of like on Star Trek The Next Generation, when the ship is at warp and you see the stars streaking by. It looks like that. It looks like the old Windows screensaver when you're flying through space, right? And that helps you know which way you're flying. So 3 should be 30%, 4 40%, 5, so on and so forth, all the way up to 9. I think if you hit 0, okay, yeah, 0 is 100%. So right now 100% is about 560-ish for us, 558, 560, somewhere in there. Now, that's still not very fast, and space is really, really big in this game. So, what you can do is, by default, I believe I'm using the default key, is you can change the IDS multiplier. Right now, right down here it says IDS times 1. If you use the 7 and 9 keys, you can change that up or down, just like you use the bracket keys to change the shield or weapon power levels up or down. So 7 won't do anything right now because we're already at the lowest. But if we were to hit 9, that would take us to IDS times 2. Now, it doesn't change our speed automatically. We were at 100% at IDS times 1. So at IDS times 2, we can hit the 100% key again, and as you can see, we're now traveling at 11:16. Now, if I bump this up using the 9 key on the number pad up to times 5, that's the highest you can go, and hit 0, basically this is as fast as my ship can go using IDS. Now, if you need to stop, which sometimes you will, the quickest way to do it is make sure you're in IDS mode and hit the backspace key. If you hit the backspace key, it sets your velocity to 0, and your ship will stop as quickly as the thrusters on your ship have the power to make it stop. According to Newton's laws of physics, you know, a body in motion tends to stay in motion until acted on by an outside force. So once your ship gets going, it's going to keep going until you use your thrusters to change your direction or you run into something, and that wouldn't be good. So that's how IDS works. Now let's set it back to kind of a more reasonable number, and let me show you something about how IDS works. So I'm back down to 1. I'm going to set it at 50%. Now I'm using the mouse to steer. Now as I move the ship, you will see these 2 white squares, or these 2 squares. One's white and one's blue. The white one is where I want my ship to go. The blue one, which is trailing behind, that's the direction my ship is actually moving. Why is it lagging behind? Because it takes some time for your thrusters to get your ship moving in the direction that you've turned to face your ship, to work against your momentum, your inertia, and to get it going in that direction. Now, it doesn't take long right here, and if you want to fly your ship like it's an airplane in the atmosphere, this is how you do it. But if you go faster, let's bump it up to 100%. In fact, let's bump up our IDS and then go up to 100%. Now we're going significantly faster, or we will be momentarily. We're going to go significantly faster. Now, watch how long it takes for that blue square to get back to the center. You know, it takes a lot longer. That's because you're going faster, which means that your thrusters have to work harder to compensate for your change in direction. So, now, all of this maneuvering uses up fuel. So, it's something to keep in mind. You should use IDS sometimes, but sometimes you probably shouldn't. Now, what's the alternative? The alternative is inertial flight, which is where you fire your engines and your ship coasts forward, and because there's basically no friction in outer space, it works. So, how do you do that in the game? Well, the default key is the spacebar to switch back and forth between IDS and inertial. And when I hit the button, you'll see down here where it says inertial, when I hit the button, it's going to say IDS and now inertial. Now, in IDS mode, as I already showed you, if I turn the ship, the thrusters are going to, you know, guide the ship into the new path that I've set by pointing my nose. Now, what if I'm in inertial mode? Well, and I'm explaining this in these terms for people who are not familiar with these concepts, but now that I'm in inertial mode, you'll see that when I turn the ship, that blue square doesn't follow me. My momentum, remember that blue square shows the direction my ship is actually traveling. My momentum is carrying me in that direction even though my ship is no longer facing that direction. So, like right now, if I do like this, I'm basically coasting sideways through space. You can't even see the blue square on the screen right now. Now, let me turn back in the direction that I'm going. Now I'm basically flying forward. So, this is kind of where your AS and WAS and D keys really come in handy, because if you want to change your course while you're in this mode, it's pretty easy to do. You can hit W, and you'll see that the blue square is going up relative to us. So our course is changing. If I hit A, it starts to go to the left, and S, it starts to go to it starts to go down, and D to the right, of course. And Q and E still rotate your ship. It doesn't really change your heading. Just remember that when you're in inertial flight mode, you are not necessarily traveling in the direction that you happen to be looking or that your ship happens to be facing. You're flying in the direction of the blue square. That's where your ship is going. So, inertial flight mode can be very, very useful. In fact, most combat really takes place in inertial flight mode. Personally, when I play the game, I'm rarely in IDS mode. I spend most of the game in inertial flight mode. It's a little intimidating, but once you kind of practice with it and get the hang of it, it's really, really fun to use, and it's not as bad as it looks or as it sounds. So just keep in mind that when you use the WAS and D keys, you are changing the direction that your ship is traveling, and you can move the mouse and change the way you're facing, but keep traveling towards the blue square. So that way you can fly backwards or sideways or all catty corner if you want to. So let's level everything back out, and we're going to go back into IDS mode, and as soon as I hit the space bar, you're going to see that blue square travel back up to the center as the thrusters compensate for our heading. Now let's bring the ship to a stop by hitting the backspace button. Alright, so that's the basics of flight. That's the basics of the flight controls in the game, and that is the basics of the HUD and all the images that you see here around you. So hopefully you'll have a little bit better understanding. When you see this cockpit, you won't be quite as intimidated as you might be otherwise. It's really not that bad. There's a lot of information that's displayed in multiple places to make it that much easier for you to find it when you need it. So I'm going to cut the video here because it's been about 30 minutes. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about how to move longer distances. We've shown how to fly around our local area and maneuver the ship, but we are going to need to learn how to travel long distances, and to do that we'll be using our jump drive. So until then, I hope you're doing well and continue to do well, and I'll see you in the next one.